All right, welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy, and tonight, or at this, in this, so let me do this. YouTube, here we go. And on this stream, I am going to be reviewing a couple videos that I've seen recently. I watch a lot of YouTube videos and other media, and so I could review things all day long. I see so many interesting things that I want to comment on. Um, so it's hard to choose just one or two things. But I saw an interesting video on History Valley YouTube channel, an interview with Dr. Bart Ehrman, who is one of the more famous, probably maybe even the most famous biblical scholar slash critic slash uh, critical analyst. What do they call them? Basically, a biblical scholar of the skeptical viewpoint. And honestly, what he said was very interesting to me because people who have watched my channel know that I consider myself a Christian, and yet I deny the atonement for a number of reasons. And when I make this argument, when I say things like that, people say that is so far in the fringe of ridiculous beliefs that you could think of yourself as a Christian and deny something, a doctrine as central to the faith as the atonement. And people say I'm just making things up. I am just deleting something that is so clear, so obvious to everybody that it makes no sense to even take such a view seriously. And what's interesting about this interview with Bart Ehrman, and we won't watch the whole thing, but we'll watch enough to get the idea. And I had never heard him say this before. Apparently, in scholarship, and in his own scholarship, but also according to others, the atonement is a doctrine that is questioned, whether it is really a Christian doctrine. And according to him, the the authors of at least the author of at least one gospel deleted any sort of reference to the atonement and apparently didn't believe in the atonement. So I think that's quite fascinating that Dr. Ehrman, and people are saying, oh, well, A's philosophy, you agree with an atheist, anti-Christian scholar. Well, here's the thing. Just because he is not a believer does not mean that he can't read the words in the Gospels and, understand what they mean. If the Gospel doesn't teach the atonement, then you don't have to be a believer to see that. Okay. And what that tells me is that I'm actually onto something, that this really is something that needs to be taken seriously. And we're going to see his reasons. And also, there's another video. Our old pal Matt Slick had an interesting conversation. I just wanted to. So, people who watched my channel for a long time know that when I originally started, it was basically a lot of videos of me having conversations with a Calvinist radio personality named Matt Slick. And I still listen to Matt Slick and hear what he says, and listen to what he says. I haven't challenged him in a while just because he's gotten really bad at just kind of hanging up on me and not letting me make my point because he remembers who I am now. So when I call in, it's not a productive conversation because he basically just shuts me down, talks over me, tells me I'm satanic, and then moves on to the next caller. So, that's just how he operates. But I still kind of listen to him just to hear him saying, and he's still teaching the same nonsense that he always has been. But nevertheless, it's instructive because a lot of Christians think the way he does. And it's not like he's making things up. One of the things I like about Matt Slick is he does teach his viewpoint with a great deal of clarity, and it does explain how let me put it this way, when I originally started listening to people like Matt Slick, I was like, he's got to be just he's the one making things up. We got Vaughn Eric in the chat. Good to see you. So, but when I started listening more and more to him, and this was kind of part of my awakening from the more evangelical fundamentalist belief system. I just started realizing he's not just making things up. There is a basis for what he's saying in the Bible. So I had to make a choice. Do I accept these really troubling things in the Bible and try to figure them out? Or is there another solution? And what I started to realize, this was years ago at this point, what I started to realize is maybe, and this is something that you're not supposed to think as a Christian, maybe the problem is the Bible. Maybe we need to, maybe the solution to this, and this didn't happen immediately. Originally, according to my original line of thinking, I was like, there's got to be a different interpretation. There's got to be he's misinterpreting it, or something's going on here. But then the more I looked into it, the more I realized, oh, he's actually, believe it or not, as much as I disagree with his theology, he's actually teaching the truth. So then I had a lot of decisions to make. Like, how do I want to deal with this? How do I want to go about this? Because according to my old faith, like, you can't. The Bible is the ultimate source of authority. What it says, you have to believe it. But then I started to realize, well, what is this document? What is this collection of text? Like, what is its history? Where does it come from? Like, is it really the end all be all? And it kind of led me into my current line of thinking that really the Bible is not something that's inherent to Christianity. It's something that, and when I say the Bible, I mean the Bible in its current construct. The 66 book canon, according to evangelical Protestants, the Catholics have a different canon, but or it's the same canon, but different texts are also kind of seen as informative. Anyways, so there's that. And I will say, yesterday was Easter Sunday. Excuse me. So we'll look at that. We'll talk about that. Yesterday was Easter Sunday, and I went to church. I go to church every so often. There are a number of large churches in my area and smaller churches. I live in a pretty populated area. And I went with some people I know. And, I did kind of mostly stop going to church just because I can't find any churches in my area that teach what I believe, which isn't surprising because, I mean, if there was, I don't need a church that teaches everything I believe 100%, but there are no churches that teach anything really close to what I believe, unfortunately, as far as I've been able to find. But so I went to a pretty mainline denomination church that's very large with hundreds of people in attendance, maybe I wouldn't say thousands, but there was a lot of people there, a lot of people. This was Easter Sunday, and it was a lot of people. It was a big crowd. It was a big crowd in that one. And I sat and I listened to the sermon. And this church is so large that it has several Easter Sunday sermons, and each one is attended by hundreds and hundreds of people. And sometimes I get depressed. I don't know what other people were thinking, but when I was in that church service, I was getting depressed because I was actually listening to what the pastor said. And the pastor was saying things that oh, well, thank you, Andy. Thank you. A lot of people will do not agree with that, but I appreciate your sentiment. I was listening to what the pastor said. I looked around and I tried to gauge the audience. Like, what are these people thinking about what's going on? Are they listening? Are they actually paying attention to what's being said? And to summarize, I'm I'm obviously not quoting everything. Oh, yeah, good to see you, Mike. Good to see you, Mike. But yeah, the eggs. Where the egg? Yeah, it's interesting. You're right. But the message was, and again, this happens most times I go to church. I notice this. The message was everything that I fight against on this channel. It's the blood sacrifice. It's the human cult blood sacrifice message that you're and this is again, I'm paraphrasing, but to get to the essence of it, you're a hopeless sinner. There's nothing you can do to pay your sin debt to God because you're just such a wretched little creature. So God created a solution to this problem of you being a terrible, just your very existence is just shrouded in sin. So God created a solution for you. And he sent his son to be a blood sacrifice. And he sent his son to be killed by the people who were living at that time, the Romans, whoever it was. And his shed blood paid the price for your sins. Okay? And when you put your trust in Christ as your Messiah, your sins are forgiven. You're regenerated, or whatever it is. You are now considered good. You are considered righteous. You couldn't do this on your own. You need to all this stuff about you need to recognize your sinfulness. You need to recognize you need a savior. Jesus Christ came. He paid the price for you. And once you put your faith in Christ, then you are good to go. You know, he actually said you have to maintain your faith, which not even some Christians are even denying that. But the bottom line is, if you have faith, then Christ's righteousness covers your sins, and you can go to heaven just on that. You don't. It's not. He said these things. He said it's not about being good. Christianity is not about being a good person. It's about putting your faith in the one who is good. Things like that. Which is a terrible, terrible message. I mean, because first of all, because it's just not what Jesus taught. Jesus did teach you have to be a good person to go to heaven. Jesus did teach you have to be righteous, good. So he's not teaching what Jesus taught. Is part of the problem. But the thing is, the whole point of the religion is that yes, you do have to be a good person. You're supposed to be a good person. That's what God wants us to do. And you can get an argument about what exactly that looks like or what exactly that means. But the point is, God has created us and asked us to do things. And right relationship with God is being good. And if you listen to Jesus, being good means, first of all, loving God, but also loving your neighbor, taking care of people, helping them, caring for their well-being, being nice to them, things like that, which I think is very good. So the fact that this is being taught, and again, when I look around, I could tell. I don't think the people in that room are evil people. They all look like very fine people, probably better than me. I mean, most of them are probably actually better people than I am. I'm not going to deny that. But I really got the strong sense as I sat there and listened that they are being misled. And this pastor, he really seemed like he believed what he was saying. But as I listened to it, I just couldn't help but think, I can't imagine standing up there and casting my soul away. Assuming I do have a soul and heaven and hell really exist. I can't imagine standing up there and saying those things without having a dread that I'm being in defiance of God. I'm saying things that are just evil. And I don't think he doesn't think about himself. He thinks he's the one saving souls. But when I listen to it, I look at it and I'm thinking to myself, wow, you're really going to stand up in front of a room of hundreds of people and teach them that being in right relationship with God doesn't mean being a good person, that you don't have to obey God, that your unrighteousness is covered by the blood of Christ, and it's not about your righteousness, it's about Christ's righteousness. Is this really where you want to invest your soul, your eternity, your eternal destiny? Anyways, let's get to the videos, because that was the actual title of this YouTube. So that was my experience. And I guess I'll finish with this as far as that experience. It just reminded me of how important what I'm doing is, how necessary it is that these, and again, I honestly, I think all those people in that room, they really love God. They really love Jesus, but they're being fed something that they're being taught that this is how you're supposed to follow Jesus and follow God, and they're wanting to do that, but they're trusting these authorities, they're trusting these churches. But at the end of the day, folks, the blind will lead the blind to destruction. It's ignorance is not going to be an excuse. A lot of these people, if they really do buy into it and think that their sins are covered, it's not going to be good for them, in my opinion. It's not going to be good for them. Now, some of them, not all of them will probably end up being bad people because of this, but at the same time, some of them might. And I've heard some people say I can sin because Jesus pays for my sins. So anyways, let's get to the videos because I want people to understand that I'm not just making things up, that there's a basis for this. Now, the title of this video, this is on the History Valley YouTube channel, which there's a lot of crazy stuff on that channel I don't agree with. But this is Dr. Bart Ehrman, and the host is on the left. His name is Jacob Berman. And the title of the video, it was posted 11 days ago on April 10th. And the title of the video is The Atonement Fraud. Luke's Gospel is Fabricated History. Now, I think this title is very misleading because I don't even think Dr. Ehrman makes this case that Luke's Gospel is fabricated history. But he does make the case that the atonement is something that needs to be reconsidered. So let's get into it. I watched this a while ago. Let's just see how it goes. And hopefully the audio isn't too bad.
Well, hello everyone. Welcome to a video on the History podcast, and today I'm joined by Professor Bart Erhman. Today we'll be discussing his new course titled Luke's Maverick Gospel. The link to purchase the course will be in the description below, and it will also be in the pinned comment. That being said, Bart, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining me once again. Can you tell me how many lectures will be in this course?
So it's going to be 8 lectures.
Hold on, I think
Luke's Maverick Gospel.
I think I might be.
Will be in the description below, and it will also
the course over the space of 2 days on the 11th. At the end of each day, there'll be a Q&A. And so there'll be 2 very full days with 8 lectures packed with information.
So why does Luke present a radically different Jesus from what we see in Matthew, Mark? Or if I can rephrase the question, what way does Luke portray Jesus that's different from what we see in Matthew and Mark?
Well, of course, there are lots of similarities. It's why we call them the synoptic gospels, because you can actually put them in parallel columns and they tell many of the same stories, and sometimes in the same words, often in the same words. But when you look closely at Luke and compare him to the other 2, there are stark differences that almost nobody notices because they don't read them. They'll read a story in Matthew, then the same story in Mark, then the same story in Luke. But if you do that, you start noticing things that are striking. And so just as like one example that I'm going to be emphasizing, and that I think is really pretty significant, is that both Matthew and Mark understand that Jesus' death was for the sins of others.
Now, I want to say something here. Dr. Ehrman, Chris, I'm sorry. This has been a problem on my channel. I don't know how to turn up the volume any higher. I really don't. I've tried very hard to increase the volume, but I just can't figure out why it's so low. I'm not sure what the problem is, but unfortunately, I just haven't been able to troubleshoot that problem. So I'm going to do my best to kind of pause and reiterate what's being said because people have complained about the low volume a number of times, and I haven't figured out how to fix it yet. But one thing, I want to disagree with something Dr. Ehrman just said. Now, Dr. Jacob, who's the host on the left, on the YouTube video, where is the volume on this? Oh, here it is. Yeah, as you can see down here, I have the volume all the way up on the YouTube channel. So, unfortunately, I can't figure out how to turn the volume up. I wish I could because I know it's very low, but yeah, at this time I haven't figured out how to do it. There might be a way, but hopefully you're just gonna probably have to turn up the volume on your computer and then turn it down when the video stops playing. I don't know how else to. I wish there wasn't a problem, but this is my low production quality that I hope to solve at some point in the future. I have, this is just my little dinky YouTube channel, so it'll have to do for now. But anyways, okay. Jacob Jacob Berman, excuse me. He asked Dr. Ehrman, who's a professor at UNC, um, textual critic. He asked him, how is Luke different from the other gospels? And Dr. Ehrman basically said there are many similarities, obviously, but one major difference is that Matthew and Mark are very clear that Jesus' death is to pay for the sins of others. And I want to state right away, I do not agree with him. Now, he goes on later in the video to explain why he thinks Mark and Matthew teach this, but he only gives literally one reason, and it's one verse. And I've discussed this verse many times, Mark 10:45. So, a virtual audio cable should solve the audio issue for your audience. Okay, we'll have to look into that. Maybe you can explain it to me later. But I just want to lead off. Dr. Ehrman's opinion is that Matthew and Mark teach the atonement, and that Luke does not teach the atonement. And his thesis, and he actually created a course in his university, in his university post, where he's going to be teaching his students, this idea that Luke essentially deleted the atonement for whatever reason. That Luke basically had Matthew and Mark. Well, let's listen to Dr. Ehrman. I don't want to talk too long.
And so he had atoning sacrifice for sins. Luke certainly knows that Jesus died, but he's gotten rid of the idea that it's an atoning sacrifice.
So there you have it. I don't know if let me reiterate all that. Luke teaches the idea that Jesus died, which is obvious. But according to Dr. Ehrman, Luke has erased the notion that Jesus' death is an atoning sacrifice. And I find that incredibly fascinating because that's what I've always taught. I've taught there's no atonement being taught here. Jesus is not teaching that his death is a payment for the sins of mankind. And when I say that, people's heads explode and they're like, how could anyone possibly think that? And what I'm trying to show people here is that I'm not making this up. Now, again, I can hear my critics now. Dr. Ehrman is an atheist. He's not a Christian. He's not a believer. And therefore, his opinions are not to be taken seriously. He can't understand the scriptures properly because of his lack of belief. People, that's just not my perspective. I mean, he is an unbeliever. I understand that. But they can read the text as well as anybody, understand what the words mean. And if Luke isn't teaching the atonement, then that needs to be understood. So let's try to find out what Dr. Ehrman's reasons are. Let's see if he clarifies here what he's seeing.
Jesus is not said to die for sin in Luke. Luke has a different understanding of Jesus' death. And so
we're going to start over.
For sins. Luke certainly knows that Jesus died, but he's gotten rid of the idea that it's an atoning sacrifice. Jesus is not said to die for your sins in Luke. Luke has a different understanding of Jesus' death. It's important, but it isn't because of atonement. And so, Christianity in some ways is built around the idea of Jesus' death for the sins of the world and his resurrection. And Luke has his death and he has his resurrection, but the death is not for the sins of the world.
Mm-hmm. Luke is, in some sense, structurally similar to Matthew, but different. It has a genealogy of Jesus, but puts it in chapter 3, whereas in Matthew, it puts it at the beginning. And they both have infancy narratives, of course, in the present text that we have. Are Luke and Matthew, is one drawing upon the other, or are they drawing from?
You know what? I'm not really worried about this. Anyways, what I'm going to do is this. I think I've actually already played enough of this video. Dr. Ehrman does go on. Later in the video, he does clarify. I think he does go on to explain his reasons for thinking that. For basically, I recommend watching the entire video, but basically he has already stated the so-called abstract or the general idea behind his argument, which is that the Gospel of Luke does not teach the atonement, and I completely agree. The only thing I would disagree with Dr. Ehrman, as I've already stated, is that neither do Matthew and Mark. The atonement is not a Christian doctrine. It's something that was made up later and injected into Christianity. It's pagan mythology. There are so many problems with it. And I've started to see other larger Christian channels start to notice this. I'm starting to see more people recognize that the atonement is questionable, and I'm starting to see other people recognize that there's not just one view of the atonement. So if you have the Eastern Orthodox view of the atonement, you have the Catholic view of the atonement, you have the Reformed perspectives on the atonement, there are perhaps as many as 10 theories on Jesus' atonement and how it works. So if this was really something that's so central to Christianity, why do these different groups have such radically different ways of thinking about it? Now, I will admit, they all do have some idea of an atonement, but the fact that they haven't really grappled with how exactly it functions and what it means for everybody is a sign that maybe this is something that wasn't central to the religion from the beginning. It was something that was kind of developed in different groups, kind of developed their own theories and ideas of what it means. Now, I will say this. This is what needs to be said. What obviously muddies the water, and what has always muddied the water, is the fact that Paul does teach the atonement very clearly. He does teach that Jesus was a blood sacrifice and atonement. My argument has always been that Jesus doesn't. And this is what Dr. Ehrman has discovered as well. Jesus does not teach the atonement, and Luke doesn't teach the atonement. And I have read the earliest church fathers, and believe it or not, if you look at the earliest church fathers, they do not talk about an atonement when it comes to salvation. I think that the atonement was a doctrine that was created a couple, maybe 1 to 2 centuries after Jesus Christ, after a lot of pagan Gentiles were converting to the faith from Greco-Roman philosophies and religions. I think some of them brought their ideas with them, and obviously, I think that perhaps, again, this is theoretical. I think that perhaps Paul may have been influenced by these ideas previous to writing his epistles, the ones that he actually did write. And I think that this is what's going on. I think that Jesus Christ taught a very Jewish originalist idea of salvation, which is that to be saved, you need to obey God's commands, which is what all the prophets taught up until Paul changed everything with his idea that the law and the prophets were a schoolmaster until the time of Christ. So this is why it's absolutely necessary to see things the way I do. This is the only thing, my system is the only thing that solves the problems. Make a good point. Luke seems to be more focused on fulfillment of prophecy being the reason for the sacrifice. Yeah, more reasons to be suspicious of Paul. So this is something that people need to grapple with. Again, I recommend watching the entire video just so you know I'm not, taking Dr. Ehrman's words out of context. I think it's quite interesting. Against the History Valley YouTube channel, and it's called The Atonement Fraud. The title of the video is posted 11 days ago. So you can go take a look at that. But now we're going to switch over to a little conversation that Matt Slick had a couple days on his YouTube channel. This was also April 10th. And it kind of deals with free will. It's just kind of an interesting idea, something to think about, something that to get our brains thinking about these issues. And I think the idea of free will is very interesting. And I think the doctrine of free will is necessary for any system that is going to rely on an objective universal standard of morality. I think humans need to have free will, because if we're just kind of like totally determined. Now here's the thing. The Calvinists like Matt Slick deny that humans have free will in the libertarian sense. And really, when you get right down to it, they don't have any free will, because God determines everything, and God determines what our nature is. What they'll say, and you'll hear it here. I'll let Matt Slick speak for himself, but my opinion is that the doctrine of free will needs to be defended, needs to be understood and recognized as absolutely central. And when I say free will, I mean libertarian free will, autonomous free will, the ability to choose, which really choose between good and evil at any moment in time. And when the thing about there are branches of Christianity that are in agreement with the materialists and the atheists. The materialism, atheism is basically the idea that the universe is we're just a bunch of atoms floating around in space or flying around in space, and all the atoms are being controlled mechanistically by the laws of nature. And well, your body's made up of atoms and chemicals. These chemicals, all they do is do what the laws of physics and chemistry tell them to do. You can't do anything otherwise. So humans aren't really making choices at the end of the day. Now, our brains, according to them, our brains produce consciousness. And in our consciousness, we have the idea, this feeling that we're making choices, but we're really not. It's really an illusion. The really what's happening is our bodies are basically operating as mechanistic objects floating around the universe, while at the same time our brains are producing an illusion of choice within us. And therefore we aren't really making choices. It feels like we're making choices, but at the end of the day, when you really analyze it, we're really not. And there's no way around it when it comes down to materialist aid. That's what they have to go with. There's nothing else. They have to embrace that perspective. Now on Christianity, you can say we have a soul, or we have an independent mind that kind of is running the show behind the scenes, and that's what's controlling our body. But there are branches of Christianity which deny even that. And they actually deny it in a different way. What they'll say is that, yes, we have a soul, we have a mind, but everything that happens within our soul, within our mind, is predetermined by God, essentially. So at the end of the day, you have a theistic version of atheism. In atheism, you have a lack of choice, a lack of ability to choose. But in these versions of Christianity, you also have a lack of ability to choose. It's just that God has arranged it so that whatever happens, and you also. So it's very interesting. I think that how at the end of the day, the this these branches of Christianity are functionally indistinguishable from materialistic atheism. And I think that should be a serious problem. But let's listen to this conversation and see what we have going on here and how and
on the air. And let's get to Carolina. Welcome on the
You do.
I'm in there, man.
Saved always saved. Like
Okay.
I'm for the free will Baptist church,
Okay.
and like I don't believe that there's any works involved to be saved. I believe it's just trusting in Christ. But I feel you can still reject Christ and denounce him and apostasy and not be saved anymore. Like, what's your stance on what?
John Steve.
So if you couldn't hear that, a guy is calling in. He says he's part of the Free Will Baptist Church. His question is actually about once saved, always saved. And he says he thinks that there's no works involved in salvation. You don't actually have to obey God. That's ridiculous. No one's. That's just not a view that Christians should hold. So he clarifies he does not think that you have to do good works to be saved. Okay, so we've got that out of the way. But then he does say that he thinks that humans can leave the faith and apostatize and then lose their salvation. So that is where Matt Slick is going to pick up and present his viewpoint.
7 through 4. Jesus on it.
Online.
Well, Jesus said 6:30, 7 through 4. Jesus said about it. And to me, it's very clear. He says, all that the Father gives me will come to me. And when it comes to me, I certainly will not cast out, for I've come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of him who sent me. That of all that he's given me, I lose nothing last day. This is the will of the Father. Everyone who beholds last day. So Jesus is saying we can't lose any, because if he did,
Ugh. Sorry, y'all. My computer is so bad. It really, my computer is actually pretty good, but it's so old that it struggles horribly with StreamYard. StreamYard is really the only program that gives it problems, and I think that's because StreamYard is kind of newer. So Matt Slick said John 6:37-40. So all that the Father gives to me will come to me, and the one who comes to me I will certainly not cast out. For I have come down from heaven not to do my own will, but the will of him who sent me. This is the will of him who sent me, that all that he has given me I lose nothing, but raise it up on the last day. So this is proof to Matt Slick that you cannot lose your faith. Now let's keep going here.
he'd be sinning. He'd the Father. Okay.
So if Jesus loses anything, Jesus would be sinning because he's not doing the will of the Father. Now, just right off the bat, I have a problem. So if someone walks away from Jesus, is that the same thing as Jesus losing that person? I don't think so. To lose means that it's your fault. If Jesus loses someone, then yeah, that'll be on Jesus. But if someone walks away from Jesus, that's not Jesus losing him. That's the other person walking away. So right here we have an exegetical disagreement here.
He was going to been like Christianity and went to
But then of us. So what one believes, we never truly say to begin with, playing the game.
Yeah. Thank you for the response.
Okay. And now, when you say free will Baptist, what do you mean? Because there's different phrases that people use for that. What do you mean?
So, Free Will Baptist is based. We don't believe it's the Calvinist view. It's the other view. I forgot the name.
Arminian.
Yes.
Mhm.
But it's basically will to choose Christ to be forgiven of sin. Like it's not predestined. Like
okay.
it's still up to you.
Oh, okay. So let me ask you, free will. Okay, so it's up to people's free will choices. If that's the case, why does Jesus say you cannot come to me unless it's granted to you from the Father? 6:65. Why does he say that? If
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Sure. John 6:65. Jesus says, "You cannot come to me unless it's granted to you from the Father." Okay.
So I'm kind of new to Christianity. Like I don't understand it. Like I understand like the main things. Like basically, I guess what I'm saying is like you're not saved. Like you believe you're not saved until you trust in Christ.
Okay, let me help you out here. You're new to Christianity. You're in a Free Will Baptist church. They're going to mislead you into some serious theological error. Okay, they're going to do not saved, or it's a call or like that. But what they'll do is they're going to uplift human freedom, human will. So let me, if you don't mind, I'll spend a little time with you and help you out. Because it's not me being arrogant. It's years and years and years of discussing this, going over this, examining this, debating it, teaching it. I mean, thousands of hours. All right. So the free will issue, free will is not the ability to simply be able to choose good and bad. You can do either one, and then you choose. No one forces you. That's not free will. Because if that's what free will is, then God doesn't have free will. because God cannot choose to do good or evil. He can only do that which is good. And what people automatically do.
So humans don't have the ability to choose good and evil because God does not have that ability. God cannot. This is what Matt Slick just said. This is his argument. Humans can't do that because that would mean that we are basically better than God. The problem is, uh, God literally said that that's an ability we have. God said we have an ability to choose between good and evil. That's actually clearly taught throughout the Bible. I don't understand this. I don't understand. This is a really, really bad argument. That so if humans can actually choose between good and evil, somehow that makes us, I don't know, superior to God, and therefore it can't be the case. It's really nonsensical. This is poorly thought out. It's a non sequitur, and it flies in the face of all of our experiences, which is that we can choose between good and evil. So I don't think he is saying that. He is having to change the way he thinks about free will because of this reason. Not that people don't have it. Okay. No, you have to understand Matt Slick. What Matt Slick is doing here, and we're going to continue to listen to him, is that, what he's trying to say is that free will isn't what you think it is. People think that free will is the ability to choose between good and evil, but we actually don't have that ability. Okay, according to Matt Slick, because if we did have that ability, then we would have an ability that even God doesn't have. Okay. Now let's analyze that. Let's just analyze. Let's just listen to what Matt Slick has to say and analyze it afterwards.
That's what free will is. Then God free will. God cannot choose to do good or you can only do that. People automatically do, and theologians and people who don't deep dive into the scriptures, they will define terms unwittingly, terms in relationship to themselves and standards. So, for example, you have to be able to do something good or bad. It's free will choice. That's what free will is. Well, that's a human standard. It's not the divine standard. Because God can't, like I said, God cannot do those things that are evil. So we have to define free will as it relates to God because we're made in His image. Genesis 1:26. So free will is the ability to make a choice consistent with your nature. It's not.
There it is. So this is really key right here. Matt Slick and people like him define. Is he a fake dirty varmint? Good to see you, first of all. Is he a fake Christian on purpose, or does he believe what this is? See, dirty varmint, I'm not sure if you were here earlier, but this is the exact problem I have is these people say these things, and what shocks me more than anything, I have a really hard time with the idea these people actually believe what they're saying. But I really think that the ability of humans to delude themselves and deceive themselves runs so deep that even though to me it looks like it's so ridiculous no one could actually believe it, they actually do believe this. Like, and you'll see why later. I want to get to the point where he just comes right out and says what it is that is the basis of his reasoning.
Now we have God freely, He cannot sin, so He's choosing freely according to, and the unbeliever freely chooses according to his nature. And the Bible says the unbeliever, he's slave of sin. Romans 6:14-20. A hater of God who doesn't can't do any good. Romans 3:10, 11, and 12. And spiritual things, he cannot understand them or receive them. 1 Corinthians 2:14. His heart's desperately wicked and deceitful. No man can trust it. Jeremiah 17:9. He's by nature a child of wrath. Ephesians 2:3. So if you have someone, as the Bible says, the unbeliever is a slave of sin, a hater of God, doesn't seek for God, doesn't do any good. He's by nature child of wrath, full of wickedness. Well, how does he just pick God? Well, it's on free will. But that doesn't answer the question. If the Bible tells us that he can't, then point.
All right, did y'all hear that? Hold on. Let me make sure my computer's working because I really want to hone on to something. I'm going to reiterate. I'm going to restate what Matt Slick just said. If the Bible says that humans don't have free will, then why are you saying that humans do have free will? Let's think about that. That is a very good question. And this is what I'm trying to get. Let's play it again. Let's just play that last little bit again so we really understand, because I think this is key to solving the problems that I'm seeing with everything that I'm seeing.
Well, how does he just pick God? Well, it's no problem. But that doesn't answer the question. That he can't.
And there it is. If the Bible is saying they can't, then you shouldn't be saying they can. You know, that is a very interesting statement in my opinion, and it's something that everyone needs to think about. Because here's why. When we need to understand that there's actually two sources of revelation, assuming you believe in revelation at all. Anyone who's going to take the idea of God and God's revelation seriously, now obviously the atheists aren't going to do that. But if you do, if you're a Christian or even another religion that believes in God, what we need to understand is that there's actually two sources of revelation. There's what's called general revelation, which is the universe, and there's what's called special revelation, which is usually considered like holy texts or scriptures and things like that. And my opinion, so what modern Christianity, what the modern churches are trying to teach, what Matt Slick just said, is that essentially the religious text is what takes precedence over general revelation. The words in the book take precedence over. And what I mean by that is, listen, just hear me out here. When we go about our daily experiences, what does it seem like is the case according to our conventional observations? Okay. It seems like we are making choices. People are making choices. They can be good, they can be bad, or they can be something in between. Maybe you can argue that all choices have some moral value or some are neutral. Like if I choose to eat an orange this morning instead of an apple, am I doing something evil or good, or is it just neutral? Some people will say that the choice, even that a choice as innocuous as what to eat for breakfast, has moral value to it, good or evil. But anyways, I'm not trying to make that case. What I'm trying to say here is that why do the words in a book supersede our observations of reality around us? If it appears that humans have the ability to make choices, and there's a book that says we don't, then what are we going to go with? Okay. And this was a choice that I was forced to make a number of years ago, where I said to myself, there seem to be things here that are irreconcilable with my observations of reality and what I think is ultimately true. And I think that, and actually with my conversations with Matt Slick, that really kind of pushed me in this direction in many ways. It wasn't just that, but that was part of it. And specifically, my understanding of Romans 9, wherein it is indisputably taught that God creates some people as objects of wrath to be sent to hell, and other people as objects of glory that he has pre-chosen, predetermined, not because of anything they did, but because of God's, own basically desire to have that person be in heaven and the other people go to hell. So, like a lot of people, when I first came across this, because it's, you aren't born knowing what Romans 9 says. So when you finally read it, you have to confront it and actually think about it and consider it. So when I first came across Romans 9, my first reaction was, that's not what it's saying. There's no way God is sitting up there in heaven before time and he's picking winners and losers and he's, choosing his buddies that are going to get saved and all the rest. These are objects of wrath that he's going to send to hell for all eternity because it makes him look good to the people who he does choose. He's going to say, you see how great I am? I chose you because I like you. And that's my glory. I get to choose. I chose you. Now love me because I chose you. Well, all these other poor souls get to spend eternity in hell because I created them so that I could look really, really good. So I said to myself, no, there's no way. But actually, and I hear Christians, many of them troubled by this. And some of them try to find ways around it. I could name names. But they are people who haven't, in my opinion, reached the fullness of their walk towards ultimate truth. But they want to remain faithful. They want to remain Christian. Their minds are trapped in this box that says you have to accept all of what the Bible says. And there's a passage that seems to say very clear that God is creating some people for destruction and some people for glory. Okay, so we have to deal with it. So I guess my point here is that I reached a point where I had to say, you know what? I'm going to have to give something up. I simply cannot worship a God who does that. I cannot worship this evil monster who is going to create poor people to suffer. And I guess some people say they get annihilated, whatever it is. But in my opinion, they get sent to hell where they suffer for all eternity. Okay, that's what I believe judgment is. So I had to reach a point, and what it led me to is an understanding that, believe it or not, I don't have to accept that part of the Bible because I'm a Christian. And what defines Christianity is the teachings of Jesus Christ. And it led me to this path where the church actually mixed other people's ideas with the words of Christ. And that's what became, quote unquote, Christianity. But now, and people have forgotten that history, now we're in a place where you have people like Matt Slickle saying the book says it. And because the book that the Catholic Church created says that, you have to believe it. Don't believe your lying eyes that people have free will and they can choose between good and evil. Don't believe your heart, which tells you that God is this really disgusting, tyrannical monster that's just throwing people in hell just because he thinks it makes him look good. Okay, you have to accept it. It's just what the words say, but. I think that people need to understand that this is based on a definition of Christianity that was created by men who lived long after the time of Christ, and I don't think Christ ever had any of this in mind. So this is why I'm trying to get people to understand that really, fundamentally, Christianity is just based on the teachings of Jesus Christ, and I don't think Jesus Christ actually taught these doctrines. But he did mention John 6, 34 or 44 or whatever it was. Would you say that you reject worshiping Yahweh but accept? No, not at all. No. Yeah, Yahweh is God. We don't worship Jesus. Jesus is just a messenger of God. Okay. All worship, but that's what Jesus taught. Jesus never taught people to worship him. Okay. Jesus is the one he said, respect me as you respect the Father, but that's in terms of seeing him as an authoritative representative of God. He doesn't want worship like God does. Okay. Well, most Christians do worship. Yeah, that's a huge problem, Andy. It's a huge problem, and that's part of what I'm trying to fix, as best as I can. Per St. Thomas, salvation is a full understanding of its Christ's beatitude. Thus, hell is a loss of understanding. Well, that's an interesting viewpoint. I don't agree with it. I think salvation is obedience to God's commands, and that's what Jesus taught if you listen to everything Jesus said. And again, I'm not trying to like be rude or disrespectful, Pseudo Silas, because you're a nice person. I'm sure you're being, but I'm just disagreeing. We can disagree respectfully. That might what you said might be part of salvation, but it's certainly not the fullness of salvation. So, all right, to summarize here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to summarize, and then I'm going to post the link for people who want to get a conversation. We won't be able to talk long because I'm busy. Really, the main point of this broadcast was to do the video review. But I thought to myself, you know what? Have a little bit of time. If you want to have a little chat for maybe max an hour, maybe we can do that. But really, let's think back about what we discussed tonight. First, we reviewed a video from Bart Ehrman, Dr. Bart Ehrman, who admittedly is an unbeliever, so that needs to be taken into consideration. But he has recognized, and a lot of people have recognized, that it does seem that the gospel, in my opinion, the gospels don't teach the atonement. And when I say the Gospels, I mean Matthew, Mark, Luke, and I really think John actually as well. And that when people accuse me of kind of fabricating my own religion by saying Christianity doesn't teach the atonement, no, actually other people are recognizing this. Scholars can see this. Many scholars have seen this. I'm not making things up. I'm pointing things out. I'm trying to save Christians from what they've been taught, what they've been misled to believe. And part of it is a lot of people, they don't have time to do all the research on their own. They want to go to church, they listen to the pastor, they have families, they have jobs, they're relying on these pastors to tell them the truth. And ultimately, even though it falls on them to do their own research, a lot of people with their lives and they're busy and they have other commitments and things, they can't do the same amount of work that a pastor can, or a scholar whose job is to study these things and teach them. So they go there, they go to the churches, they're taught these things. And like, okay, well, there's an atonement. That's what Christianity is. And, then they have a couple kids and they take the kids to church and the kids are taught there's an atonement. And then, you taught there's an atonement from a young age. So you just accept it, and then at some point, maybe you question it, maybe you don't. But whatever you're quote unquote programmed to believe, it's going to be harder to ditch that later in life if you're not taught it in the first place. So this is where we are, hundreds of years after Christ, or I guess you could say starting with Paul. The atonement was injected into Christianity from pagan mythology, Gentile converts, Greco-Roman converts, things like that. They built these doctrines. They turned Christianity into a myth cult, a blood sacrifice myth cult. And this history has been lost. The Roman Catholic Church embraced these views, adopted them, made them official doctrine. For centuries and centuries, access to the scriptures was cut off. You had these authorities teaching people what to believe and say. They conducted the Mass in Latin. No one understood Latin. People didn't have access to the text. Then you have the Reformation. You have the printing press. You have these Bibles being printed. People finally starting to see through the cracks. You have the reformers taking us, understanding what Paul said and basically developing their doctrine from that, but still inheriting some ideas from the Catholics, namely the idea of the canon, which included Paul, instead of taking us all the way back to the origin, which is what I'm trying to do, which is, if you look at Christianity, what it really is the teachings of Jesus Christ. That was always the basis of Christianity. That was always what defined Christianity, not the Bible as it's currently constructed, but the teachings of Jesus Christ as spread through the world by the apostles. Sometimes I think Bart is pretending to be atheist. He comes to many of the same conclusion as you. I can't see into anyone's mind. He claims to be an atheist. He claims to not be a believer. But again, taking him at face value, I think honestly, here's what's going on. Believe it or not, when you don't have an emotional commitment to the texts, you see them for what they really are. So a lot of Christians have been emotionally, how should I put this very kindly? There's an emotional element to people's faith and religion. And when they come to these things, they come with certain preconceptions and ideas of what they want to be true and also what they're being taught. And it leads to them not seeing. And so what I'm trying to say is when you're emotionally invested in something, you lose objectivity. And I think that, believe it or not, if you are not emotionally invested in the text themselves, it actually helps you see things more objectively. So I think, believe it or not, in some cases, for people who are not motivated by animosity or hostility to the religion, they actually have a more clear understanding of what is being said than people who are of the faith, because our faith is being manipulated and distorted by our emotions. So it's possible that people like Dr. Bart Ehrman are seeing things more clearly than an actual person who's a believing Christian, because there aren't emotions involved. He can say, well, this is what the text is actually saying. There's no atonement here. So I think that this could be, again, this could be my bias as well, thinking this, but I think that what's going on here is maybe instead of coming at the text with a preconception, he's just reading the text and says, there's no atonement. There's no atonement here. Why are the Christian churches teaching atonement, but you read the documents, there's no atonement? So he's seeing it with more objectivity. Now, there are a lot of secular scholars who oppose Christianity, and they will find reasons that are not justified in, like I did my last stream was on Dr. Dennis MacDonald, who thinks the Gospels are basically imitations of Homer's epics. Now, I went through that very clearly, and I think demonstrated that is a kind of pathetic and unjustified position that's not based on an actual understanding of what's going on. So we have to ask, what's going on with Dr. Dennis MacDonald? Is he just wrong? Is he being blinded somehow by his own ego, his own preconceptions? I don't know. But clearly he's getting something very wrong. So just because someone's, not of the faith, you have basically what I'm trying to say is if you come at these texts very objectively from whatever perspective, I personally believe that people will see that there is no atonement, their sins aren't paid for. And the thing is, people want to believe that. Believe it or not, this is the flesh. The flesh wants to believe that at the end of the day, I should obey God. It's kind of a good thing, but at the end of the day, Jesus' blood is going to cover whatever I do. All I have to do is believe that he died on that cross for me, and subconsciously, at the back of my mind, it kind of gives me a little bit of comfort that I can do this or that. And it's all right. Jesus got me. Jesus got my back. Sorry, folks. You're going to be held to account for everything that you do, say, and think. All right? Your comfort is an illusion. And I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. I'm trying to help you. I'm trying to get you to see this because it doesn't help us to deny reality. It's like if you have a big debt payment coming up, you can throw the mail that tells you that in the trash and not look at it. But someday, payday is coming. Payday is coming. And it's a lot worse when payday is your actual soul instead of just a credit card payment or whatever it is. So we need to get this right. It's very important. I see what you're saying now, and I 100% agree. Jesus wanted Torah observance. That being said, he also seemed to have some sort of social reformer. Yeah, right on, Andy. Right on. So he wanted Torah observance, but the way I look at it is Jesus had an understanding of the Torah that is different from the Torah that is actually recorded. And that's very difficult to reconcile, but that appears. So when Jesus says we must obey the law, This is why Christianity is Christianity, because it's based on the teachings of Jesus Christ. It's a totally unique thing. But what it essentially is Jesus's presentation of the truth of God's revelation. And I think what he's trying to do is save the original. I think what he's doing is he understands the true original message of God as revealed through the prophets had been distorted over time, including through the texts, unfortunately. And Jesus is sent as a restorer of all those problems. And I'm not going to defend that entire concept here, but I think this is something that needs to be taken into consideration. I think he's an atheistic Christian. That's a very interesting label for somebody. Like the same way Dr. Justin Sledge is an atheistic Jew or is an atheistic Mormon. Wow, these are some really interesting concepts. Atheistic Jews, atheistic Mormons. Very interesting. Hi, Ace Philosophy. The journey to divine is unique for each person. Let God be the judge, not humans. History is meant to teach us through its events, not to be followed blind. Okay, I don't think I disagree. All right, what I'm going to do, I'm going to post the link. If somebody wants to join, do so. You don't have to be someone who necessarily agrees with me. We can chat for like maybe 30 minutes to an hour at most. I'm terribly busy, so I can't stay for long, but maybe we can, if there's interest, we can get something going. We have our first guest. We have Andy.
Hello.
How are you doing, Andy?
Hang on. I'm going to put some headphones in. I just realized.
Looks like you're on camera. Did you want to be on camera?
Oh, I keep tape over my camera because I'm paranoid.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's a smart thing to do.
Ever since that NSA crap with Edward Snowden, I've always just been like, man, that probably is paranoia, but I always just feel like there's some creep watching me, so I just put tape over my camera.
Well, here's the thing. The government can hack your computer and look through. This is proven that not just the government, but hackers in general, if they have access to your Wi-Fi network, some of them are good enough to hack in and take control of your video camera and do things like that. So it's not like totally out of the question that those things. And so I've heard some people. There are people who've claimed that, and who knows whether it's that the government has put things on their computer and recorded them in their rooms and things like that. So it's not outside of the realm of possibility. So I respect that.
It freaks me out.
And Mike, how are you doing?
Greetings, brethren. Yeah. And they don't have to there doesn't have to be a guy sitting there watching you. It's just that it's always available. And once you do something like felony wrong, they can go back to the tapes and then they'll say, oh, wow, this is what he did every single minute of his life for the last 10 years. But no, right. I don't think somebody's sitting there watching you saying, oh, he's doing something wrong. But yeah, thanks for the airtime, Ace. Quite frankly, I just wanted to say thanks for you. I'm 63 and you guys are clearly, by the sound of your voice, younger than me. And I don't care how messed up your philosophy is on Paul or free. I don't even know. The tape I was trying to listen to was the audio was bad, but no, A's. I'm so proud of you guys. I'm so in my youth I wasn't God, but I ain't gonna talk about God. I got to get to the bar. I got to chase women and this loud music, and I'm just so proud of you. I don't care what you do in your off time, you are promoting the Father at a young age. I'm so proud of you.
Wow, Mike. See, a lot of people don't look at it like that. I know you disagree with a lot of what I say, and other people who do that kind of wish I would disappear. So I appreciate that. I talked to somebody recently who said he's glad that when I die, my philosophy will go away with me. He actually said
Holy
that.
shit.
Oh my God. Oh my goodness.
He said your view is so fringe that when you die, no one will remember you, and that's a good thing.
Those are the exact. I think he's quoting Luke, where Jesus was talking to the adulterous woman.
Yeah, right. Well, to be honest, like I didn't get mad
Canaanite.
because I didn't get mad because I can actually understand that perspective of if you think somebody is doing something that's very destructive, like if you believe that if somebody believes that I'm leading souls astray and destroying the truth, then I don't know. It's not totally unreasonable for that person to feel that way, but it comes down to who's telling the truth and who isn't, in my opinion. At the end of the day,
If you ask me, I try to keep the least amount of bias in my views, and I don't I don't have a dog in this race because I don't have any belief in this direction, but I do listen to just dozens of different biblical scholars talk about these verses and in the Gospels, and your view seems to line up most with scholarship out of any Christian that I've ever spoken to.
yeah. Well, the thing is, see, that's actually if other Christians hear that, they're going to consider that a notch against me. But the way I look at it is, I think that the scholars in academia, despite most of them being secularists and non-believers, have actually seen things that practicing Christians don't see because of their emotional attachments to the text. I think that academia has solved a lot of the problems that plague modern Christianity by proving that there are certain parts of this whole scheme that don't belong. And when you actually recognize them for the mistakes that they are, you basically boil Christianity down to its true essence. And I think when you boil Christianity down to its true essence, it's a beautiful, wonderful thing.
Yeah, it is. It was a man that was. Well, I mean, for me anyway. Just even as an atheist, it's amazing because it was a man that was willing to risk his life to protect the people around him from the oppression of Judaism. Or
Yeah.
from the laws, the oppression of the punishments of the laws, rather, not of Judaism. He still wanted Judaism, but he wanted the punishments to be less harsh. Like he didn't want people to be getting killed for breaking the laws. It seems like.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think that's part of it. I thought you meant like. I think what Jesus clearly taught is that a system had arisen in the time where he was flourishing, where the religious elites had created this ridiculous system of codes that nobody could follow. The elites were teaching it but not following it themselves. And he had compassion to the point of death to save people from this false system that had arisen and basically correct the viewpoint in the face of monumental opposition, which is, quite heroic. You're right, in my opinion.
Absolutely. And not only is it just amazing that he stood up to the law like that and essentially to the Romans because that's who was backing it, but he also he stood up for women in the first century. It's pretty amazing. And not only just a woman, but a Canaanite woman and an adulterous woman. It's like he's like Martin Luther King.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that Jesus Christ really existed, and when I read the record of him in the Gospels, he was an incredible human being. Because one thing that strikes me, I really believed that Jesus Christ loved the people who hated him, and that is a really hard thing to do, because when you love someone, like I'm talking about the Pharisees specifically.
Mm-hmm.
When you really love someone, when I say love, I don't mean romantic love, but it could be part of that. But I'm saying when you care about someone's well-being, when you really care about them and want them the best for them, and that means speaking the truth to them and telling them they're wrong about what they're doing, and that they will then hate you for it, that takes an incredible amount of personal conviction that I think is one of the greatest testimonies to Jesus's real character. More than anything, is he was willing to accept the hatred from people he loved in order to speak the truth to them.
This is something that I already know how you guys feel about this, but that's something that I can relate to myself. when I talk to my Christian family, because you know, I believe I'm right. So when I debate, you know, my family about the Bible, which I seem to always get cornered into doing, regardless of how much I avoid it, they, you know, I'm doing it knowing, and it has happened in the past. I've been completely rejected and cut off by some of my family for my lack of faith. And it's the same thing. Like I almost knew that that's what was going to happen, but I risked it anyway to try to, you know, give them what I thought was truth.
Yeah, and even though I don't agree with your conclusions, Andy, I think that takes a great personal courage. Again, I don't think you're right ultimately about everything, but
Yeah.
anytime someone does something that results in personal loss in order to you basically stand for what you believe is true, I think that shows that you have a very that's a good quality in a person. Jill, what's up?
Hi, Jill.
Welcome, Jill. Welcome, Jill.
Jill is MIA at the moment. Jill, you're muted. I don't know if you're muted or. Yeah, I can hear you now.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm fine. What's up, Jill?
Oh, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm just trying to.
Oops, sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't know if anyone had any particular point they wanted to make or argument or point of contention.
Not an argument. I just wanted to bring up from your video about the parallels between Homer and Mark, or the lack of.
Okay.
Jill seemed to be confused about the 12 ships and 12 crew members. Homer had both. I'm sorry, Odysseus had both. He had 12 ships and he also had 12 crew members.
Jill, do you agree with that?
Oh, I don't. I'm sure he had 12 ships, or that passage at least was talking about the ships. To me, it seemed. Yeah.
Okay.
But,
I don't.
Yeah,
I
don't have any primary sources
side
for the story. So I mean, no primary source was provided. So I don't know if that was even written after Jesus.
Well, I heard the story
about. It was like 800 years. 800 years before the New Testament.
Well, there are different versions of the same story.
Yeah.
So we don't know where that version came from.
Well, let's look at it. Let's take a look at it then. Let's see. I'm going to pull up the Odyssey, Book 9, and we will, again, I'm not trying to force you to agree with me, Jill. And I don't think it's that important of a point, personally. But just so we can all see the facts, and we may not agree on at the end of the day, but we'll all have the facts to make a decision.
$5 meal deals with a McDouble and sweet and sour sauce.
Hell yeah, that sounds yummy. Hey, get a McChicken for me, Mike.
Where is it? Man, I'm getting hungry all of a sudden.
I know.
All right, let's see here.
Yeah, it does say in a different verse though that there were 12 ships. That's true, actually. There were 12 ships, but that verse that you were or that passage rather that you were talking about, that A's showed the quote, it to me and to A's and to everyone else, I would imagine it seems pretty clear that it was talking about men in that specific instance, because he told the men, you know, anchor the ship or whatever it was, and then leave all of them behind. And it was, there were 600 men, and he was saying all but the best 12 of them, the best 12 of those men.
All right, here it is.
It seemed to me that they were talking. He was talking about the ships, and then he said the best of the 12 ships, or the 12 best ships. So I mean, obviously, we can agree to disagree on that.
So he told the men to stay where they were. You see how it says, "I told my men to draw the ship ashore."
No, he told the men to draw the ship. He told the men to draw the ship. So the subject is ships. So in my mind,
the men are the subject.
Well, no, he said I
Hold on.
told my
Let's read.
men to draw the ship ashore.
Jill, 1 second. I'm going to read it. And then let's see what it says so that the audience can see what we're talking about. I told my men to draw the ship ashore and stay where they were, all but the 12 best among them who were to go along with myself. This is book 9.
Oh, okay. So he had
where
12 the best 12 among them. So they weren't actually his disciples.
Yeah, just there was a group of
Yes.
600. It was an army of 600 soldiers, and he chose the best of the 12.
So you would
the best 12.
consider this a parallel?
Yeah. Not, but that I don't
That's
think
a really
that-
poor one, but
it-
okay.
Yeah, I don't think that it may have even been an intentional parallel, but it's worth, if they both have a crew member of 12, if they both have a crew of 12 people, and you're seeing how many.
No, he didn't
parallels
have a
are in-
crew of 12 people. It says
they
that
did
he
after
put the
after
12
this point.
best among them in your
Correct. Yeah,
interpretation.
he left the rest of them behind and continued the journey with only those 12. So in this
Okay.
story, Jesus takes his crew of his disciples with him, which we know was 12. And in Odysseus' story, he takes his 12, the 12 best among him. And in a way, like the disciples are considered like higher above the rest of society. So it's like the best among him as well.
No,
It is
they
kind of a
actually
parallel.
weren't. No, they actually
Yeah,
weren't.
they were provided.
When Jesus, well, let
information.
me
The
finish
rest
my
of them were-
sentence. Can I finish my point?
Yeah.
They weren't the 12 among the disciple, the best of the 12 among the Jesus' disciples. They were actually, Jesus actually chose them before he chose any of his disciples. So
Yeah, when I say best, I mean that they were like privy to secret teachings and privy to the information of the parallels with the parallels men, the parables, not parallels.
in my opinion, and again, I think that this is a coincidence. It's not a parallel. I think that the 12 apostles of Jesus Christ are better explained by reference to the Jewish context of the 12 tribes of Israel.
I agree.
So I think this is merely a coincidence at best. Now,
even though these aren't disciples, by the way, they're just men.
Could I just give my response to this really quick?
Yeah,
Just
go
since
ahead.
we
Go
have
ahead.
this- It's short. I've been typing out responses to each of these similarities just to give my thoughts on them. Some things I agree with, by the way. Okay, so I wrote the 12 disciples is indeed a callback to I wrote disciples again, to the 12 tribes of Israel. The 12 disciples is indeed a callback to the 12 tribes of Israel, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. The number 12 was extremely sacred all across the entire Mediterranean, to West Asia, to North Africa. The Egyptians divided the days into 12 parts. The Eblites created the 12-month year. The Sumerians used the government system with 12 officials. The Babylonians created the 12 zodiac signs. The Greeks created the 12 Olympians. The Hittites worshipped a group of 12 gods. The Romans had the 12 tables of the law. The Zoroastrians had the 12 commanders of light. And of course, Homer gave Odysseus 12 crew members and 12 ships. Everyone around the Mediterranean held the number 12 sacred, and this continued for thousands of years prior to the New Testament and even long before the Old Testament. It's not that the number of disciples was chosen because Odysseus had 12 crew members, but it's more likely that the Cyclops story stood out to Mark because of the storm. Storms were extremely common in the Sea of Galilee, and because of the use of the sacred number 12, both in the number of crew members and the number of ships.
Well, those are assumptions you're making, but that's fine. But you could use the number 12 and still not go along with any type of parallel.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, he chose the number 12 likely because of the 12 tribes of Israel. But
Right,
I'm saying that the parallel, that if this is indeed a parallel that was intentionally drawn between the Homeric story, I think that it's likely that he would have chosen this story in part because of Homer's 12 crew members and 12 ships. That would stand out to someone in the Jewish faith.
You do understand what innuendo is, right? It's just or guessing or just making assumptions.
Yeah.
Why is that scholarship to you? Just curious. Why is that even?
These aren't
something
assumptions.
that's relevant?
I'm not assuming anything.
You just said more than likely. That's an assumption.
More than likely, what?
You said more than likely. He was
appealing
to the.
To me.
Okay, see, right? That's an assumption. That's innuendo. That's not actual evidence of anything. But why is that even scholarship to you? Because I wouldn't. That's what I would call liberal scholarship. I wouldn't consider that scholarship at all.
Why not?
Because it's just mere assumption. It's just saying, well, it's more than likely. There's no connection to any text of Odysseus or any.
That's I have no issue with that.
It's connected, like you said, that the evidence shows that it's connected to the Old Testament. So you can find out where they got it from, perhaps. Okay, all right, but the 12 comes from the Old Testament, not anything from Greece or Rome.
All of those Mediterranean uses of the number 12 that I listed that predate the Old Testament, that could be where the Old Testament got them from.
Okay, but Mark is certainly not drawing from any text from the Greek.
And I already agreed with you on that.
Okay, so I don't know why that's even an issue.
I said that the story of Homer. If Mark is drawing a parallel between Homer, if that's what's happening, I'm not saying that's what's happening. I'm saying if that's what's happening, he likely chose it, in my opinion.
Yeah. I would additionally say that Jesus is mocking. Maybe Jesus, in his instance, is mocking that story, and Mark is recording it. Also, possibility.
Yeah. I've heard that same point being made about the Dionysian parallels. That's an interesting perspective. I don't reject it.
Does anyone think Jesus was married? This Power of One is asking, was Jesus most likely married?
That's something I've heard some scholars claim. I don't personally know enough about the claim to even go into that. But I have heard some scholars sort of dip into that.
Personally,
he was away from home a lot. He was away from home
actually,
a lot.
I can give you the name of a scholar really quick that did. It was just recently on History Valley. It was he was talking about. Look, there's no reason to be rude or discredit anybody.
Well, no, it's not rude. That's just what liberal scholarship is. It's not being rude. That is.
You don't even know who it is, or what you don't even know who it is, or anything that they've said, and you're jumping to conclusions and labels.
I said I'm sure, just like you were sure, just like more than likely. This is Mark is borrowing from.
But that's based on evidence. That's based on evidence.
Okay, yeah, and then based on evidence, based on what I've seen, only liberal scholarship argues this type of argument. It's inconsistent for one, because any text that says anything about Jesus being married is probably going to be pseudographical, but and far removed from the actual historical or the Advent, the actual event that happened in the first century. So it's kind of hypocritical for a liberal scholarship to actually prop this up as something that's valid, that's a valid historical option for what the life of Jesus, when they cry and complain about the 70-year gap of the New Testament, what has been authenticated. So it's kind of hypocritical to pick the 2nd and 3rd century text, Gnostic text, when we have texts that we know are a lot more reliable in the New Testament writings.
All right, Andy, you were going to tell us who the scholar is.
But we don't. Liberal scholarship doesn't use equal scales. They're just all about sensationalism.
Yeah.
How about this? My opinion is listen to what everyone says and take the true and reject the false. So
yeah, you just make your own. Just listen to what exactly. Like you nailed it. Like there's no reason to just reject someone because of a label. Just listen to what they have to say and reject.
Well, no, I'm not rejecting it because it's a label. I'm rejecting it because it's pure innuendo.
Yeah,
that's all it is.
You don't
just saying that, and that there's no empirical support for it.
What text do you think they're referencing to come to this conclusion?
Well, like I just gave you an example. They bring up the idea that Jesus might have been married.
I'll stop you right now that it's not a Gnostic text. I can tell you that much.
Okay, it's not.
No.
So what text it says Jesus is married? And what century
I'll give you the scholar's name so we don't waste a ton.
Well, no, just give me the text. It doesn't really matter what the scholar. And what century does it come from?
It comes from. I don't remember. It's either
it's a 4th century papyrus. Okay, it's a 4th century text. So why is liberal scholarship propping this up as an actual historical text? That meaning it could be true. Well, let me just ask my question. This is just critical thinking. This is what I do when I evaluate scholars.
What is a 4th century text? What is a 4th century?
What do you mean? What is a 4th century text?
I think
it is a 4th century text.
You don't know what a 4th century text is?
No, Andy is asking
what is it? What are you talking about? He didn't. I didn't even tell you a 4th century text. Like I didn't tell you any text. You're jumping to conclusions.
The fragment that says that Jesus talks about Jesus' wife.
This is
Like
about an
Jesus' wife.
Aramaic reconstruction of like Mark or Matthew.
Okay, what and
Right.
it says
And you
that
jumped to
it says
conclusions.
Jesus has a wife, right?
You rattled off all this bullshit for the past 5 minutes that was completely
Okay,
irrelevant.
so what century is your text from?
I have heard of this. I think there is great suspicion surrounding this text as well.
Well, hold on. What century is your
By the
text
way,
from?
this isn't even. It would be from the 1st century. It's a precursor to Mark or Matthew, an Aramaic, the original Aramaic version of Mark or
Wait a
Matthew.
minute. All right, Andy.
The
I have
original.
heard. Jill, hold on one second. Jill, hold on
Oh
one
my
second.
goodness. Oh my. All right, go ahead.
And
I'm
I don't.
sorry.
And this isn't a view that I hold as like something that I believe or something. I'm just saying this is a scholar who holds the belief that Jesus was married to Mary. And if you wanted to like for the person that asked that question in the chat, someone asked, what do you guys think about that? I said, I don't know enough about this, but there is a scholar who holds that belief. And all I was doing was getting that scholar's name. And you are like just being so crazy about it.
Okay. Well, yeah, let's hear what century, what's the name of the text and what century does it come from?
I want to know the name of the scholar who holds this view. That's what I want right now. All right, Andy, what is it?
It's Dr. James David Audlin, Audlin. And again, these are not my views. These are his views. I was just helping out that person that asked in the chat. Relax.
Dr. James Audlin. Hold on one second.
Yeah.
James Audlin. Jesus was married. All right, there you go. For anyone who wants to research that, honestly, this was kind of popularized. I heard people talking about it like maybe like half a year to a year ago. It kind of was something that people were talking about a lot. And I kind of looked into it. And I will say, I don't have to say this, but I agree with Jill that the basis of this is quite speculative and very little firm.
Well, I'm still curious as to
I was listening to it while I was working, but I wasn't particularly convinced myself.
Well, it's sensationalism. That's most of liberal scholarship. But I'm just curious as to what text is he drawing from? What's the primary text or the?
It's a reconstruction
from
of the precursor to either Mark or Matthew. I don't remember.
Okay, so it's a reconstruction. When was it reconstructed? When was it created?
He's doing it. He's the one doing it.
Oh, he's the one doing it.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you consider that to be something we should put on the level of the New Testament?
Did you not hear me? Do I got to repeat myself for you? Can you just kick me
Jill,
from here so that we can?
I'm just curious as to why these things are being brought up. Why they're even?
But argue. You do nothing but argue.
No, I'm just asking questions as to why.
Nothing but negativity every time.
Okay, it would be like
it's confrontation, it's insults every time.
All right, because you don't want to answer to just making actual.
I don't want to talk about it because I don't know shit about it. I was helping that person with a scholar that knows about it. They hold that view, and I was giving them the name of a scholar.
It's just no critical thinking skills at all. I mean,
all right,
insane.
Jill,
he's insane.
Jill, I didn't boot you because I think that it was getting a little bit out of hand. I'm sorry, Jill. You have a way of making your arguments in a way that just create discord. All right. So what I'm going to try and do is
that was
I'm going to bring.
Fault too.
No, well, just Jill. One thing I want you to do, Jill, is try to let the other person speak. All right. Try to let the other person speak. When you make a point,
just stop the insults. Like, just quit discrediting everyone and insulting everyone. Like, there's no need for it. Just face the facts and reject or accept them. Like, there's no need to talk shit about people.
If I may, I'm not insulting anyone by saying what liberal scholarship is. If you're offended by that, then I'm sorry. But that's what liberal scholarship does. They bring up irrelevant factoids.
Yeah, you have labeled him as a liberal scholar because he potentially holds the view that Jesus was married.
Again, it's not an insult, but that is what liberal scholarship does. That is their brand, if you will, of scholarship. As opposed to conservative scholarship, which deals more with the text and the actual texts that have been demonstrated to be historical.
If you hold the view that Jesus was married, are you automatically by default a liberal scholar?
No, you're engaging in liberal scholarship by propping up any text
So what is
that
liberal
is
scholarship?
pseudographical.
What is liberal scholarship?
Well, liberal scholarship, you can engage in liberal scholarship, meaning you engage in innuendo, sensationalism, sophistry in some cases, but not all. But it's mostly just sensationalism. But the problem I have is liberal scholars will tell you that the New Testament is not reliable because of this 40 to 70 year gap, which is remarkable compared to other ancient manuscripts, by the way. The Bible has more bibliographic support than all of them combined, Homer, etc. But they'll say that, but then they prop up these Jesus Mary texts, which are just redactions. I mean, they're not even historical at all. So why are we even bringing that up as a possible viable story about Jesus? It's just,
well, you haven't seen his evidence. That's my point. You haven't seen his evidence.
I've asked for it.
He may have he has a video on History Valley from a couple weeks ago where he lays out his case. If you want to watch it, I didn't.
Yeah.
Really
Well, I asked for was the text. That's all. I just asked for what text was
again, like I couldn't. I didn't even know. I don't even know if it's Mark or Matthew. Like I can't tell you. You'd have to watch the video. It's not long. It's an hour and 46 minutes, and he lays it out in full detail.
It's not going to be Mark or Matthew. I can guarantee you that.
I agree with Annie. All Annie did was his original intent was just to say the author and give that, and then move on. I don't think Annie had any intentions beyond that. So I don't think Annie
I don't even agree. I don't even agree with him.
Yeah.
It's just someone that holds the view that person was asking about.
Yeah, I think, Jill, I think liberal to you means anyone who doesn't think like you do, personally.
No, there's a distinct type of scholarship that we would consider to be liberal scholarship. For instance, let me give you a quick example. Maybe this will clear up the cobwebs. When you write a book, when you say things like, well, what happened the first 12 years of Jesus's life, or the first 12 years of Jesus's life, quote unquote, and then you bring in all of these 2nd, 3rd century, 4th century texts, and you try to piecemeal together an actual narrative and suggest that perhaps this was the actual or part of the actual life of Jesus, or the story historically of Jesus. That's what liberal scholarship engages in.
Let me ask you a question.
You'll never see a conservative scholarship doing that.
Is it liberal to ask if, like, 1 John 5:7 is an interpolation?
What do you mean? Is it liberal to act?
Is it like, would it be considered liberal scholarship to ask if a biblical text is perhaps errant in some way, and that there's a more true original version that we don't have?
Oh, well, no. Asking questions about the textual criticism is a conservative scholarship. I would definitely trust it is a conservative scholarship motif, if you will. So I don't have a problem with textual critics. They're the ones that determine that the most reliable is the New Testament as far as the life of Jesus, the life and teachings of Jesus.
I don't know. Nobody disagrees with that. Literally, no scholars disagree that including liberal scholars, I assume that the New Testament is the best source for understanding the life of Jesus. Everyone agrees with that.
So all other texts should be compared in light of that, but they don't do that. They try to put those other texts on par with the ones that have already been established. That's why it's dishonest to me, in my personal opinion.
And in this instance, he's referencing Matthew.
The Da Vinci Code was very popular with that what Jill just described. They took advantage of that and made millions. The Da Vinci Code.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right. It's a perfect example.
Yeah, I agree. The Da Vinci Code was the number of people who thought the Da Vinci relation about Christianity is. Am I lagging? Okay, I don't think that. I was. That was an interesting time period. But all right. Here's the thing. Unfortunately, my time is quite limited. I'm gonna probably host discuss. I would like, again. I have no set schedule, but everyone here is welcome to future discussions. I'm gonna shut this one down. Okay. So We're going to have parting words as usual. Feel free to make whatever case you want for, a few minutes, and then I will close things out. All right. So reverse order of when people join. So Jill, do you have anything you want to say?
Oh, Jesus definitely didn't have a wife.
Okay. Anything
Definitely
else?
didn't have any, and he's not going to find you a wife either. He said you need to find your own wife. So if you want a wife, you need to
Did Jesus
find
have
one.
any brothers? Wait.
Did Jesus
Somebody
have any
asked if
brothers?
Jesus had brothers. Yeah, does Jesus have brothers?
Of course, James was his brother, half brother.
Okay.
But also,
You think Mary popped some out is what you're trying to say after Jesus by Joseph?
I would hope so. Yeah,
Okay.
because he had
All right. Yeah.
James was his half brother. I think James was his older brother.
So the cat really?
Or
That's
was he the
surprising.
younger? I'm not sure. I have to go.
Oh yeah,
to
he
the set,
has. He had. Yeah, Jesus is the firstborn in my opinion, for sure.
Okay.
Of Mary. Yeah, I would have to.
Oh yeah, you're right. Yeah, because she's a virgin.
I'd be willing to hear another opinion, but anyways, yeah. So you think the Catholics are wrong that Mary stayed ever virgin?
That's the silly. That's not in scripture.
Okay.
So
Yeah,
why would I believe it? But thanks for having me. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the Bible clearly teaches that Jesus had biological brothers. I don't think there's any dispute. But the Catholic Church teaches that Mary stayed a virgin, and Jesus had no biological brothers, which is very interesting to me. Another reason not to be a Catholic.
Oh,
all right, Jill.
Okay.
All right. Anything else, Jill? Is that it?
No, that was all. Thanks for having me on. I'll see you guys.
Right.
See you guys next time. God bless.
All right.
Take care.
Jill. Mike, what you got? Was that food good, Mike, or were you eating it already?
Dude, I tell you what, I take my crippled neighbor to the grocery store and she gives me $5. We're both broke. I tell you what, she worked at Burger King for 15 years. She can't order at a drive-through. Can I get your? It takes 20 minutes, and I'm just dying laughing every single time. No, let me compare you brothers to some blue hairs. A blue hair is an old lady that sits in the pew at church and doesn't have a clue what's going on, but she has a blind faith, a love that is unmatched by me or any scholar. There's a love that y'all have, and I'm just proud of y'all for putting it out there, right or wrong. Same with the Da Vinci Code. You see the Da Vinci Code. How many people turned to their Bible to verify something? How many people looked at the Last Supper painting to see if the guy next to him had looked like a child? It gets us. It piques our curiosity. But you're not preaching something so. You're not flying planes into buildings. You've got a little thing going on with Paul. You've got some things going on here and there. What? Look how much I care when you're preaching it about the Father. Oh my God, I love you guys so much for doing that, and thanks for the airtime, brother. See y'all.
Good to see you,
Take
Mike.
care.
Nunya Biz. Mike's channel has his own channel. Go check it out.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yep, Nunya Biz is the name of his channel. All right, Andy. Anything?
I don't know. I've been. When do you think you'll have an? No, go ahead.
Would you rather save any arguments for another discussion when you'll have more time to kind of lay them out, as opposed to putting them forward?
They're long. They're really long.
Yeah, actually,
I've only addressed the first 3 points so far.
Well, I definitely want to give you an opportunity to do that. So with my schedule, it looks like unfortunately the best day of the week I have for conversations is Fridays, which for me is a terrible day. But I would just say be on the lookout, kind of. Sometimes I try to post in my community posts when I'm gonna have discussions or something like that. But if you see I'm having a discussion here, I'll make this commitment to you, Andy. If I have an open discussion and you join, I will give you preeminence to make your case. I'll tell everyone else that Andy can make his argument in his case in response to my previous video. So you can be assured that you will have time to speak your arguments and give or responses, something like that.
All right, that sounds good. I'll keep a lookout. One thing I did want to say, not to address any of the points, but I remember how I said that Dennis was saying that Byzantine teachers were using Homeric hymns to teach the Gospels or whatever.
I do remember that.
It seems either I misunderstood him or he may have been being even as far as dishonest, but he does go into detail and explain in a different video, and I hadn't seen that at the time. I actually watched it today, and he's talking about what's called a cento, CENTO, and it's where they used Homeric language to retell the Bible stories, like they spoke as if it was the Homeric narrator. It's quite like the language, like a word bank basically of Homeric phrases, but using it to just literally. So it does kind of give like a little bit of credence, but not in the way that I thought it did. I misrepresented what he was saying is all.
Well, because I was wondering about what you said, and that what you said did kind of shock me or
Me
surprise me. But that makes a lot more sense. So basically, for people who don't know, it looked like Dennis McDonald. I did a video on Dennis McDonald's argument that Mark imitated Homer a couple days ago, and it might have appeared that Dennis McDonald also said that early Byzantine church fathers used Homer to teach the Gospels or something like that, which would have been a very interesting thing to do, because to me that would have indicated they kind of knew that there was mythological elements to the Gospels, which is like, why are you a Christian if you understand that? See, to me, if someone really proved to me that the Gospels are based on other mythological fables and then kind of recast as Jesus Christ, I would leave Christianity. I wouldn't claim to be a Christian, because I'm not going to believe something that's based on an illusion, essentially, even if it's like all this stuff about it's spiritually true.
That's how I feel.
But I'm going to be completely honest. I have not seen anyone prove that. As far as I can tell, Jesus was a real person, and the Gospels represent real history, in my opinion. Now,
I will say that I've moved recently away from mythicism completely. I genuinely do believe that Jesus actually existed as a real person, at least.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. I agree with you there, but I also, even as a Christian, agree that the church mythologized Jesus after his death. They tried to turn him into a God man instead of and I know you don't believe in real prophets, but to me, Jesus is a human prophet, which is basically he's a human who received the revelation of God.
That's essentially what it teaches. I mean, that's literally what it teaches.
Right, and the early church tried to turn him into literally God in the flesh, and that is mythologizing in addition to other things. So, I think that's where a lot of skeptics they get hung up. They see the stories about I don't want to mention any specific, but because some of them are actually in the Gospels, but like I'll say one, like Jesus turning water into wine. I can definitely see someone looking at that and thinking that what's going on here, or some of these things, but also just some of the other teachings of the church that aren't necessarily in the Gospels. Some of the more ritualistic elements of it, and how it kind of seems to mirror or imitate rituals of other Near East / Greco-Roman cults and things like that. And I can see skeptics actually looking at that and be like, okay, this is all mythology. It's just a newer mythology that was developed by the early Jewish Christians based on things they were seeing in their pagan neighbors' practices, like that. So, but to me, I think what happened is actually that there was a real Christianity, and then that superstructure of falsehood and illusion was built over top of it. And now I'm trying to show people, okay, people, yes, there are problems with how Christianity is currently taught, but if you peel away the layers that have been built over Christianity, at its core essence, there is truth, there is reality, and there is goodness there. And that's what Christianity needs to get back to. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
Anyways, this was your final. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I just wanted to make one more point on that. I think that a lot of people misunderstand what a son of God was too when they say that Jesus was the son of God, because like, David and Solomon and Abraham and Jacob were all called son of God too. And it was just, in my opinion, it was just someone that was either given divinity or divine power or divine authority from God. That's a son of God. Ezekiel's another example.
I think you are absolutely correct. I totally agree with you. I think that
And that's
Son
what
of
Jesus
God,
was given. Jesus was given divine power and divine authority from God, and that's why he was called a
yes,
son of God.
yes, absolutely. And I think that, see, this is the thing. Like, Jesus taught in parallels, or excuse me, parables.
You
Jesus
did it
taught.
too.
I'm sorry that I just that was a terrible Freudian slip, but Jesus taught in symbolism, and people need to understand that some people take there's the words that Jesus said, and then there's the deeper meaning to them. Okay, Son of
Yeah.
God, the idea that Jesus, Son of God, is a term that denotes a relationship with God, not necessarily literal, but metaphorical, symbolic. And if you read the Daniel 7 prophecy, it points all this out. Jesus was given authority by God. He was a figure who was given authority, and thus these are the titles that apply to someone like Son of God, Son of Man, things like that. Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you there. And honestly, like, I use the term God the Father, but I don't like God the Father is like you think about a male up in the cloud, male human up in the clouds. Like, the Father is about a description of God's nature. God isn't like a male with male anatomy, up there beyond the
Yeah.
dome that covers the flat earth. God is like the essence of all creation. It's way beyond a literal human figure that's like up in the clouds somewhere.
So do you think Yahweh is God?
Yahweh, okay, well, the answer is yes. And let me clarify. Yahweh is the tetragrammaton. Now, I know that some scholars will
No, I
say
know.
it's
I'm just using it to refer to that being.
yes, I believe so.
Adonai.
Yes, so I believe Yahweh is God. Yahweh means I am that I am, and I
Yeah.
am that I am also means the eternally self-existent one. So God is the eternally self-existent being that is the basis of all existence, the essence of all existence. It's not like a human being. God is way beyond anything. I mean, God has attributes that are shared by humans, because I believe in some aspects. And again, I know an atheist wouldn't agree with this, but I think humans share some attributes with God, like having a will, an ability to determine what happens in reality through our bodies and how we make choices.
Well, the ability to smell,
Smell, yeah. I mean, to think,
because God
like,
smells the pleasing aromas of the sacrifices, so it's like he must be able to smell.
yeah. I think what it all comes down to is consciousness, awareness is a divine attribute. I think that ultimately God is awareness, God is mind, God is
Yeah.
the essential mind. So again, these are things a skeptic might not agree with, but I'm just trying to go on with like God the Father. It's not like he's like a literal man up there in the clouds having babies. It's like the Father represents that he's the source of creation. It's like a term, an allegorical, symbolic term. Um,
So what is Jesus to you? Oh, go ahead, read that if you want.
yeah, New Genesis. G's age philosophy. I think you have missed the point and now diminish Jesus as just a blessed human. I mean, a blessed human's pretty important.
Yeah,
If
that's
God,
huge. That's
if God,
hugely important.
if God's blessing you, I mean, you must have done something really special to deserve that. So, what should I believe, Nancy? What
That
should I
Jesus
believe,
was
Jesus?
God.
Yeah, apparently. Well, the thing is, I talked to Nancy. I don't think she believes that. So, I'm kind of surprised she's throwing shade at me about this. Also, Freddie disagrees. I'm guessing. I don't know exactly. Now you sound like a
Oh,
Muslim.
I've heard this. Someone else said that to you before.
Oh yeah, I've been called Muslim many times, even though I totally reject the prophethood of Muhammad.
Yep.
Now you sound like a Muslim, making God human and biological father of Jesus. That's actually the opposite of what I said. Is that what I said, Andy?
No,
Making
that's like
God,
the opposite.
Freddie. I don't know if
He
you're being.
literally he just said that Jesus isn't a physical being, so he can't be the biological father.
Yeah, I think you meant Yahweh, Andy. But
What I
now
say?
you said Jesus. You said
My bad.
yeah. Yeah. I actually made. I don't know what you're talking about, Freddie. I don't know if you're being sarcastic, but I definitely didn't say. I said I literally made the opposite argument. Anyways, okay, Andy, we're gonna close things down, and we'll
Really
hopefully.
quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
What is? I just wanted to ask what Jesus is to you.
Jesus is a real human man who was born 2,000 years ago. He has a human nature just like us. He's no different from us in that essential quality, but who was essentially anointed by God to be a messenger of ultimate truth about how to have a right relationship with God.
So would you say, like, because so other biblical figures were given divine power and authority from God, so would you say that the only thing that separates Jesus from those other biblical figures that were given divine power and authority, is the fact that he was also given the divine message?
Well, the other prophets were given a divine message. So what separates Jesus? I think what separates
True.
Jesus. So what separates Jesus as being the Messiah is that according to, again, this is my perspective, and again, this is somewhat fringe, but the reason Jesus is more than, like, quote, just a prophet, which being a prophet is very special in itself, but the reason
Yeah.
Jesus is even beyond that is because not the other prophets had and I as great as they were, I think that they had moral failings and didn't operate in continuity of communion with God in terms of divine revelation. I think Jesus' entire life is defined by perfect obedience to God and perfect knowledge of the will and revelation of God. So everything Jesus spoke is directly from God, as opposed to the
True.
prophets. The other prophets had to, like, receive the message and then say, "Thus saith the Lord." Not Isaiah says. Like, when Isaiah's having conversations with people, it's just Isaiah's opinion until he receives "Thus saith the Lord" and so forth. Jesus, on the other hand, perfectly represented the will of Father in act and word at all times. So he is the perfect representation of God on earth, as far as God represented as through the human perspective and how we should behave and have a relationship with God.
That's awesome, actually. That's a new perspective, but it's like super. I agree. I completely agree.
Well, it's something to think about. You don't have to necessarily agree with it, but it's a perspective to be taken into consideration. You know, I don't present myself as a teacher in the sense of being authoritative. What I am is a presenter of ideas. I give people ideas to think about, and they can take them or leave them, essentially. So now I do believe the things I say. I'm not saying I'm making things up, but I present them for other people's consideration. And it's up to you to search it out, investigate, and find out if it's true or not.
So he's like
Other
basically the perfect prophet, basically.
The perfect prophet. I like that. We can work with that.
Would you consider? I think you would actually qualify as a messianic Jew. I think you're
Maybe.
literally considered by definition a messianic Jew. I don't know. I hate labels anyway.
So Jesus didn't have to say, "Thus say the Lord." That seems like he is Lord. Well, he is Lord, but not in the sense that he is God. So yeah, I think Jesus does. People do call Jesus Lord, but there's different senses of the word Lord, Kyrios, in Greek. So
Yeah.
I think Chris Lucas is talking is in the sense that Jesus was, if Jesus doesn't have to "Thus saith the Lord," that means he's God. No, it doesn't mean he's God. It just
Well, there
means
could
that
also be
everything
just different. there could be different levels of power too. You know what I mean? Like he could have just given more power and more authority to Jesus to actually do that himself, while Jesus still isn't God, but he has the authority to, he doesn't need to say, "Thus say the Lord." He can say it himself with the authority and power of God while not being God.
The only problem I have with that perspective, Andy, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just trying to think of something. I think God has to treat all people equally. Otherwise, he's unfair. And I say he, but I'm talking about, that's just because that's the words we had to work with. What I'm trying to say is, I think that anything God gives to people is something they earn. So if Jesus was given more authority or power or anointing, it's because Jesus earned it somehow. And I think that's where Jesus' pre-existence comes into play, and the idea of pre-existence, because I do believe Jesus talked about his pre-existence. So I think that Jesus perhaps, and again, this is totally speculative, but I think in Jesus' pre-existence, he may have earned his messiahship. I'm just throwing that out there.
It seems that way. Well, he was like 30 years old or whatever when he was baptized, and that's when the Lord came down and he accepted him as his son and said, "I'm well pleased," and put him through trials. Like it seems like that's when the Lord intervened and gave him, like you said, his messiahship or his divinity.
And there's an incredible verse in Hebrews. I actually want to bring this up if you have time. I don't remember which verse it is, but there's a verse in Hebrews that says, Jesus, hold on. I'm not going to be able to find it in time but there's a verse in Hebrews that says Jesus was obedient unto perfection or something like that.
Yeah.
And maybe I can find it real quick.
Obedient unto perfection. So perfectly obedient. No law breaking.
Hold on, let me see if I can find it. This is worth a couple extra minutes. Let me see if I can find it.
That means no sin. That means without sin. Jesus didn't sin. That's what it's saying.
Well, not only that, it means Jesus wasn't perfect at one point. Because if you're
he became that way.
Here it is. I found it. Here it is.
Okay.
Let's see. This is the kind of verse that the Trinitarians pull their hair out over. So it's Hebrews 5:9. Let's look at this. This is interesting. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, so here it is. It's 5:8, Hebrews 5:8-9. Although he was a son, he learned obedience from the things which he suffered, and having been made perfect, he became to all those who obey him the source of eternal salvation, being designated by God as a high priest according to the order of Melchizedek. I don't know what that means, really, but that's not the point, the Melchizedek stuff. What this verse says here is that
why have I never seen this?
Yes, because it's hidden. They don't talk about it. This is really difficult for mainline Christian theology. The idea that Jesus learned obedience to God, signifying that perhaps there was a time in his life where he wasn't obedient, and that he became perfect at a point in time. So this verse says Jesus wasn't perfect at some point.
He was a son. So like that, like a son, you know what I mean? Like that's a clear indicator that it's not like it is special, but it's like there are many sons.
And this, I will admit, like I don't believe in the book of Hebrews. I don't really care much for what it says, but for people who do, I mean, this was apparently an early Christian belief that, I mean, Hebrews was written pretty early, regardless of whether it's authoritative or not. It was written in either the first or second. And it does say that Jesus learned obedience and that he became perfect, which if he's God, how can he not be perfect at some point? And another thing is, if you go to Luke chapter 1, let's see if I can find this here. No, I think it's actually 2. Oh yeah, it's chapter. Hold on, let's. Sorry.
No, take your time. I'm not in a rush.
I do want to show this. I want to show that in early. Let's see. Chapter 2. Oh yeah, here it is. This is Luke chapter 2. This is the gospel, so I believe that I'm this is something I accept. Luke chapter 2, verse 52. And Jesus kept increasing in wisdom and stature and in favor with God and men. So Jesus increased in favor with God. Look at that.
In wisdom and
And this is
stature.
Luke 2. 52.
Oh, I think that was years.
Well, look what it says in the next part of the sentence. And in favor with God and men. So if Jesus is God,
Yeah.
how is he increasing in favor with God?
Right.
And it's not just the Trinitarian that.
Yeah,
it's
in
not just a
favor
problem for
with
Trinitarians, like.
himself.
Right, exactly. So there are issues here. It does appear that Jesus became perfect.
Yeah, you're
And increased
absolutely
his
right.
favor
That
with
means that he must have been a sinner at one point prior, and it must have been prior to the
I wouldn't go
baptism.
that far.
Well, it says disobedience.
wouldn't say
Any disobedience is sin.
It's
Unless
hard
it's
to argue
talking
with
about no, even disobedience towards your family is sin. Like if he was disobedient, he was sinning. Unless maybe it was disobedient towards the law.
The disobedience to the law is the law of God.
No, I'm sorry. I should have elaborated more. The Roman law.
Oh. No, I think no, I don't. I think it's
of the Torah.
Let's go back to Hebrews 5:9. Let's read it again.
Usually, anytime they bring up disobedience, they're referring to the Torah law.
And having been made perfect. Wait, although he was a son, he learned obedience. See, a son, this son right here is capitalized, which would signify that it's sonship in relation to God.
Yeah.
So it seems to be he's learning obedience to God.
Yeah,
now,
I
do you
agree.
necessarily have to look at it that way?
With the capital S, you're right.
So it's just interesting how. See, this is another reason. A lot of people don't know that this is. I think this creates a lot of problems for what I would call mainline Christianity. Like, how do you have Jesus becoming perfect? How do you have Jesus learning obedience to God? It's just interesting questions to think about. I'm not too worried about it because I'm not too worried about the book of Hebrews. But for people who are worried about the book of Hebrews, I feel like it could be a little bit of a stumbling block for them.
Well, if Jesus was disobedient towards the Torah, if that's what this means, because it's talking about God and it says disobedience towards God. Any disobedience towards God is a sin. So if he was a sinner, and is Mark implying that John's baptism of Jesus washed away his sins? And that's why, God accepted him? Is that what Mark's trying to convey there with that part of the story?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm not going to try and answer it right now, but it's something.
Yeah, I'm going to let you get off of here.
Yeah. All right. Until next time. Thank you, Andy.
Yep. Take care.
All right, everybody. Yeah. So we're gonna close the stream pretty soon. Just some final remarks. I continue to try to help Christians see a broader perspective. It's difficult though, because people want to operate within their pre-existing frameworks and what makes them comfortable, and everyone does. I do that too. But there are issues that need to be thought about when it comes to the atonement. I thought to myself yesterday, Mark 3:21 and 3:31. I'm going to look at what those say. Mark 3. Oh, you're talking about the virgin birth? Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting conversation too. People need to think about like what really is Christianity. Is it what the modern churches teach? And when I say modern churches, it could be the Roman Catholic Church, it could be the Eastern Orthodox Church, or some other Orthodox church. It could be the Protestant denominations. Now, these are things that were constructed over time. So we need to ask ourselves, when it comes to being a Christian, what really is essential? Okay. And to me, really, it comes down to Jesus is what's essential to Christianity. All right. So, we have basically institutions that exist today, which have evolved on the idea that Jesus plus other people is what defines Christianity. And that's a problem, but it's the reason it's a really, really big problem is because everything I'm trying to do is help people understand that God exists, and you're not going to be in right relationship with God. And again, this is my belief, if you're not obeying God. So if these other people are teaching you that you don't have to obey God, whether it's directly or through some sort of veiled ideological mechanism such as the atonement, then I have to fight against that. Okay? If that's what Christianity is, then it has to be challenged. If Christianity is, if quote unquote Christianity is going to tell people that their sins are paid for by the blood of Christ, and therefore their own righteousness and goodness don't factor into their eternal salvation, that worries me. That really worries me. And I'm not gonna get a huge YouTube channel saying the things that I do. I could do it the way other people do it. I could be like, well, the whole Bible's true, and we just have to interpret it correctly. And Roman 9 doesn't say what you think it does, and Galatians doesn't say what you think it does, and Romans doesn't say what you think it does, and First Corinthians doesn't say what you think it does, and Hebrews doesn't say what you think it does. And I'm not gonna play that game. Okay, I know that's how other people grow their channels and get a bigger audience. I have to come at the truth as directly as I possibly can. We can't dance around anymore. It's been 2,000 years of this corruption and this distortion. Eventually, somebody's going to have to, jump on the grenade and try to wake people up from the deception that has arisen. And unfortunately, that means challenging the existing structure, which most people have bought into, for whether they are sincere or not. So we reviewed a video by Dr. Ehrman. He has recognized that the Gospel of Luke doesn't teach the atonement. These are things that when I say them, oh, ace philosophy, you're making things up. You're creating your own, religion. No, I'm actually reading the text for what it says. Luke did not teach the atonement. I don't think Mark and Matthew did either, except for like one verse. And I've already explained what that verse means and why it. See, I think I can help Dr. Ehrman as well get beyond seeing Matthew and Mark as teaching the atonement. So this is really important, in my opinion. When I was at that church service yesterday, I looked around me at the hundreds of people around me, and I said, these people, I know they love God, I know they love Jesus, but they're not being fed the truth. And I felt bad. I felt depressed. And I said, you know what I'm doing is important. It's necessary. And I may not be able to reach very many people on my dinky little YouTube channel, but I'm gonna it's all I have. It's all I have. So I'm gonna keep going with it, and eventually I might branch out into other means of reaching and influencing, but for right now it's all I have. handle some God for me. I just need something convincing that Yahweh is real. That's something we can talk about. I want to believe. Long-winded thoughts. Okay. All right, I'm going to shut it down. Thank you all for coming. Please like and subscribe if you so wish. And until next time, God bless. Thank you. Thank you, everyone who participated in the chat and in the panel. Thank you and listened.